Well, I want to delve into all this in a bit more detail. Antony Loewenstein is an independent journalist and the author of My Israel Question. He's joining us live now from Sydney in Australia. First of all, what are the implications for Netanyahu, for Gallant, but also more widely for other army officers and other politicians in Israel?
This is a political, and I would argue moral earthquake. Netanyahu and Gallant are not going to be arrested tomorrow. That's not going to happen. But it really is the first time in history, and Israel's been around now for close to 80 years, where there's any even possibility of trying to impose some kind of accountability for what Israel has been doing for decades. Now, obviously, this is particularly about what's happened in Gaza since October 7, to be sure. But there has long been a fear within Israel, across the political spectrum, of an Israeli soldier, a general, a politician, somebody being arrested in a foreign country and put on trial. There's been a few attempts at that over the years. It's never actually happened anywhere. So this actually happening, or at least the arrest warrants being called for, is hugely significant. And yes, the US can bully and control other countries, which they no doubt will do while Biden's still in power, but certainly when Trump comes in a couple of months. But this precedent has been set, and it's important. And I think it also signals that no one should be beyond the law. That the US, when they speak about this, as does Israel, somehow suggests that they should be above the law. This is only really a court for awful African despots. And that's been a key criticism of the ICC for 20 years, that it only goes after non-Western leaders.
And even if Israel and the US refute the authority of the court, does it ever become awkward for them, for US officials, for their envoys to be consorting with people who ultimately are alleged war criminals?
Well, the answer is yes. And really, I think it shows the stark and growing divide between the West and the rest. And what I mean by that is, since October 7 and Israel's complete mass slaughter in Gaza and now Lebanon and elsewhere, it's been so clear that the US has no intention of imposing any kind of penalties on them. And yet, about 5 minutes after Putin invaded Ukraine nearly 3 years ago, apparently Putin was the new Hitler. And this is no defense of Putin by any means, but it shows the double standards, the complete hypocrisy, and that is viewed that way. And I think it's also worth saying that one of the things the US has long feared is that they themselves will be tried before the ICC for crimes around Iraq, Afghanistan, or even Guantanamo Bay. And it's why over the years the US has often sanctioned the ICC, because they themselves don't want to be held to account for what they have done, particularly since the court came into place in 2002. So that would be Iraq, Afghanistan, Guantanamo, or elsewhere. And the response today by certain US politicians really speaks to that. I think Lindsey Graham, the fanatical Republican, essentially said, God, what would happen next? They're going to come after us meaning Americans. That is the fear here. And it's a justified fear, because the ICC, frankly, should be looking into and prosecuting American potential war crimes in Iraq, Afghanistan, and beyond.
And what does it mean then when you have this world where the US, which has long claimed to be, a key supporter of a global rules-based order, then, as you say, seems to have this double standard where it welcomes arrest warrants for the likes of Vladimir Putin, but, condemns these ones for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant? Either you let the court do what the court does, surely, or there's no point in it anyway.
And it shows for the umpteenth time that there is no rules-based international order. It's a sham. I mean, it's been a sham for years. If you speak to anybody in vast parts of the world, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, the list goes on, you think they're going to believe in the rules-based international order when they see what's happened to their own countries, let alone what Israel has been doing in Palestine for the last decades, but especially since October 7? There is no rules-based international order. It's essentially a mafia, and the mafia is run currently by Washington and Israel. And I think that reality moving forward is why we're increasingly in a multipolar world. Yes, the US is the most powerful nation on earth, and that'll continue for years, but they're no longer the sole and only power in the world. There is China, there is Russia, there is Iran, there are others, India. Now, they have their own massive issues as well. They're far from democracies, really, any of them, if you ask me. But the fact is, it's a multipolar world. And very, very few countries anymore look to Israel or America as some kind of beacon of morality. No one does, especially since October 7.
All right, Antony Loewenstein from Sydney, thank you so much for joining us on the NewsHour.